7:35 in the morning here on the Big 89 WLS. Matt Bubala in for Steve Cochran with Jane Klaus next to me. Nick Gale in the newsroom. 312-591-8900 is the number if you wanted to jump in on the call-in or text line. We're very excited to welcome to the airwaves Dr. John Duffy. He's a clinical psychologist and a good friend of Chicago media. Hey, John, how are you this morning?
I'm good, Matt. It's good to talk to you.
It's good to talk to you, too. Thank you so much for jumping on with us. You know, we did a check-in earlier this morning from Jerusalem with an ABC News correspondent hearing about the latest going on there, and it's a really tough place for parents to figure out how to talk to their kids about things like this when there's global conflict in the world, when there's such horrible images that are so easy to access online now. Let's start out with younger kids. When we have kids in grade school and in the younger grades who are getting on their own, able to get to stuff a little bit. We can't completely control what they see. They're not quite teenagers yet, but those younger kids, how do you recommend parents talk to them when they are seeing some of this stuff in ways that we can't always control?
It's changed so much over the years, Matt, because it used to be that you could control the narrative. You could control what your kids were exposed to. Now you almost have to start with the assumption that even your pretty young kids have some idea that there is strife in the Middle East, and they've seen maybe some images that you would never want your young kids to see. So you want to test out what they know, what they've seen, what they've been exposed to, ask questions, and you want to get a feel for what they know before you jump in and start telling them a whole lot about what you know, because you might tell them more than those little young psyches can handle. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
Hi, Dr. Duffy, is there an age-appropriate stance that you should take? So when you have the littles, you know, how deep do you go? And then when they're a little bit older, maybe in their teens, and really able to learn about it and talk about it, or even, you know, they're learning about it at school, what's age-appropriate? Where do we draw the line?
So if we drive the line between like teen and preteen, what I always look at is not necessarily age, Jane, but the degree of like emotional sensitivity of your kids. What can they handle? Some kids are super curious and will not feel comfortable unless they know a few details. So you need to tell those kids a little bit more. Most of us, our littles are pretty sensitive. And so we just want to tell them, hey, there's some violence going on, and there are people working on trying to mitigate that and solve that as fast as we can. You want to tell them just the very basics, because we don't want to drive up anxiety or fear or even trauma in them. Like, the news really affects kids differently now than it did not that long ago. So it's a really good question. It's important to keep in mind where your kids are developmentally before you just sit down and talk to them about something like war, some terrible global event.
Dr. Duffy, I would imagine that with younger kids, it would be a natural reaction for some of us to say, shield them from that at all costs. Do not give them any exposure to that. But I would also imagine that might be dangerous because we can't control what our kids see at school with other people that have phones. It's, you know, like you said, these days where everything is everywhere is protect at all costs and shield them, maybe not the best idea.
It's not, Matt, and you're right. This comes from like the best instincts in parents, right? You know, I don't want my kid to be exposed to this. He or she is not ready for this, so I'm going to try to hold back. But kids know now when we're doing that. So we really have to think differently than our parents did because of that degree of exposure that we're talking about. They're going to hear something, and so it is unreasonable not to talk to them a little bit about what's going on and ask them what they know, ask them what they've heard, validate what they know and heard. And also kids are going to get some misinformation, especially younger kids, and they're not going to be very discerning about it. So you have an opportunity to kind of correct anything that is not quite right, especially in a complicated situation like we have going on now.
Dr. Duffy, when you're ending that conversation with the child, talk about the importance of ending it on a high note, so giving them the comfort of knowing that people are helping each other out there. Maybe give them an action item, make a sign, do something kind for somebody else, because it can be scary. You go out into the world, you think everyone's out to get everyone else. So how do we end the conversation?
Yes, that's the thing, Jane. Right. We want to end on a positive note. Kids respond well when they have something to do. So if it's about putting together a little group of people to have a little gathering, say a prayer, make a sign, do something that is, kind of supportive of the people who are suffering. Kids like that kind of action item. You also want to be really clear, like the old Mr. Rogers adage that we use all the time. Look for people who are helping, and there are always people trying to help, trying to mitigate the conflict. And we want to make sure our kids know that there are people out there helping. And for our littles and even our teenagers, we probably want to end on a note that suggests that we and they are safe, because that fundamentally is what they also want to know. Developmentally, they're in a place where they're a little egocentric, right? That's a normal place to be. And there's some fear, like, could something bad happen to us or me here? And so we want to be clear, no, we're safe right now. We're safe and we're good, and we'll let you know if you need to know anything else. But you want to end on a high note. There's good people out there trying to do good things and help. And sometimes the news tends to focus on all the terrible things that are happening and not the good things that could be happening out there.
Well, it's interesting you say, too, because with the flood of news that we get every single day, the kids need a break. The adults need a break. I mean, I was with a bunch of girlfriends this weekend. We didn't talk once about global conflict or political unrest. Like, we didn't talk about it at all. And it was good to have that break. So we should limit what the kids know, but we should also take the break and even have the kids take the break unless they ask.
Well, I was going to say, because Dr. Duffy, if we're not in a good mental health place ourselves, how well can we, portray things to our kids? I mean, do we have to step back and get ourselves in a better place first before we start talking to our kids about these things?
Absolutely. We need to make sure our emotional house is in order. Take a deep breath. Make sure we ourselves are limiting our exposure to the news. Way too many households, I think, have a 24-hour news channel on, from sunup to sundown. And that is unhealthy for us. Jane, what you're talking about, that idea of taking a break from it, talk about something else, laugh about something else, and get out of the house. All this stuff is really, really healthy. Make sure you are in a good emotional space so that you don't break down in front of your kids, so that they don't see anxiety or fear in your eyes. They will take your cue and run with it, and it might be worse for them because they don't have the tools we do to help manage their emotional difficulties.
We're speaking with Dr. John Duffy. He's a clinical psychologist. You can find him at drjohnduffy.com. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about this, and let's ask Dr. Duffy to talk about, because we're coming out of a time in our lives that we've just been through this pandemic. Our worlds have all changed so much. How is our mental health, and how are things that we should be looking at? Let's do that. Matt Bubala in for Steve Cochran this morning, here with Jane and Nick, and we're talking with Dr. John Duffy. Dr. Duffy, let's talk a little bit. Let's move to the older kids a little bit, because, my kids are older, 22, and then I have triplets that are 18. And it's interesting with things like this, with global conflict, with anything, they are at that age now, and it's been a beautiful thing to witness. But also, as a parent, you start losing control over what their opinions are, who they're going to be, how they're shaping the world and viewing the world, and the podcasts and the TikTok videos and everything else they take in. As a parent, when kids get older, is that just we have to let go and let them be who they are? How much do you recommend we still try to influence who they're becoming?
Well, you're right, Matt, that, you know with your kids, and I know with mine and the kids I work with, that, they have so much data and information, so much stimuli influencing the way they look at the world. What we want, I think, as parents now is we want our voices in the mix. Ours isn't going to be the only voice, but kids have told me themselves, older kids, that what they need to learn most isn't to memorize information. It's how to be discerning, how to really recognize what's true, what's not, what to believe, who to follow, and who not to. And we want our voices in that mix. Otherwise, they assume that whatever they think, whatever they feel, whatever they're hearing, we endorse. And it's kind of an interesting exercise and a pretty satisfying parental exercise to engage in really healthy debate and discussion with our kids. And at 18, 22, even 14 or 15, we can do that with our kids. And they're going to hold their own more than I think most of us think they will.
We were talking a little bit about the adult situation, our own mental health. One thing Jane and I have been talking about a little bit off air is how the workplace is changing again. You know, we've gotten used to this whole situation where a lot of people work from home or we're all remote, dealing with meetings all day long, not seeing people in person. And now a lot of people I know at different companies are being forced to come back into the office. And a lot of companies trying to get people back into the office and now dealing with that. And what's your recommendation for those of us who are in those situations and now maybe got used to one way of life, but now are being pushed in another mentally? How should we be working on that?
You know, it's been so long for some people since they've been in the office that you want to kind of graduate your exposure. You want to ease your way back into the office because it is a little startling. I work with a lot of people who are being pressed to get back to work in the office, and it is a little strange for them to be suddenly kind of like on all the time and talking to people all the time and engaging a lot. And there's a degree of anxiety affiliated with it for a lot of people who got used to kind of being very insular and alone and in control of their entire environment. So ease your way back in, and muscle memory will kind of take over with time. I don't encourage people to kind of just jump in to 9 to 5 downtown, if that, or wherever your office is, and just full bore be in the office full time. That seems to be way too much, way too quickly. So my strong bias is to ease your way in. That seems to work best.
And it's funny because, I know you say the differences, but I think so many people who were remote were on Zooms all day long. Like all day long, you had meeting. So you still interacted with people, but there really is a difference between a virtual interaction and in-person body language and everything that comes along with that, isn't there?
Almost everyone would agree with you, right? It feels like there's like kind of 1 degree away that decreases anxiety. It increases actually another kind of anxiety where it's not healthy for us to be in front of screens. Pre-pandemic, we were talking about like how we want people to be in front of screens as little as possible. Then during the pandemic, all of our work was taking place in front of a screen. So, we want to limit that, because that's not good for us either. But you're right that there's a little ease to it. Like, you're sitting in your home, in your dining room, your living room, in your pajamas a lot of the time, right? Some of the work I did, I could tell my clients were in bed or really close to that. And to, kind of be on and be wearing clothes, all of that is new to a lot of us.
Well, and Dr. Duffy, you talked about it. We're getting back in the full swing of things. We have to figure out what we're going to wear that day to get back into work. Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting after meeting, and then we're in the car, we're driving home, we're commuting, we've got the kids, we've got to fix dinner, we've got all this stuff. You've talked about this before, and I find it fascinating. It's called hurry sickness. And I feel like I might be suffering from this. I call it, I'm so busy. My friends are, you're so busy. But really and truly, I'm rushing through life. I'm rushing through the meeting. I'm rushing through work and all the jobs and all the things to get to the next what? Like what? Yes. How do we curb this hurry sickness? And I feel like, maybe we're doing it now because we're making up for lost time. But the reality of it is it's going to affect your mental health. It can affect your physical health, stress, adrenal glands, all of that.
All that, Jane. You are so right. I remember talking with you about this in the past. And, this hurry sickness, I think in years past, and maybe today, there's this point of pride in being busy. Somebody asks you how you're doing. I'm super busy. And I think we need to change the narrative around that. That we have this opportunity in these years to find some degree of balance that's really healthy. And that means we are not rushing all the time, that we are in our moments, enjoying our moments, and present for them. And in doing so, I think we're modeling something really important for our kids who also have this hurry thing, who are also like super stimulated all the time, to just stop for a moment and take in through all 5 of your senses, everything that's going on, just for a moment. It kind of reminds you to be present in the moment, because days, weeks, months, and then years pass, and you kind of look back and think, oh, I think I'm missing my life here, even though I am active all the time. I'm doing things all the time, yet somehow I know fundamentally I'm missing something crucial. That's what the hurry sickness is. And the antidote is to slow down, breathe, and just take things in for a while at a more relaxed pace. And it's really good modeling for kids.
And Dr. Duffy, that's so easy to say, right? And so easy to say, oh, take the time, enjoy things. So how do we do that, though? Is it a matter of getting down to scheduling to make sure this time of day we're putting the phones down, we're not accomplishing some task, we're either present with our kids or present with our spouse, or some way to, like, do we literally have to plan that out to make sure we do it?
Initially, Matt, we do, because we are not in the habit of doing this. My bias is to schedule like a Zoom meeting, like protect time, like it's as important as anything you do at work, at least for about a month or so, until we establish a new habit. So 2 or 3 times a day, I encourage people, set that alarm or that notification on your phone that says, okay, take a minute and breathe, take in everything through your senses, and this can be a pretty brief period of time to just get you into the moment and relaxing a little bit and slowing things down a little bit. But do it multiple times a day, and if you get in the habit of doing it for about a month or so, you can even let go of the notifications, and you will kind of automatically allow yourselves those moments. But they're not just going to happen because we say we're going to. We've got to protect the time.
And also, it's a great role model for your kids.
It is. It's one of the most important things we can do for our kids now, because they are hurrying without knowing it and without knowing what it feels like not to. We all grew up with time on our hands, with, we had to fill up a lot of free time. Now, with a phone in your hand that has access to, gives you access to everything on earth, you just don't have that, right? You can be occupied constantly, and that is not healthy.
Dr. Duffy, we have 30 seconds left. The seasons are changing. It's getting colder, less light. For people that are affected by that, what should we be doing?
Yeah, so expose yourself to as much light as you can, as much vitamin D as you can. Recognize that this can be a somewhat depressing time of year we're heading into for an awful lot of people. The thing I find that works best is get up 15, 20 minutes, half an hour earlier, and give yourself more light over the course of the day. Most people can't stand to start doing this, but once they do, they tend to tell me, yes, I enjoy that.
Like most things, we can't stand the start, but once we get going, it gets better. Dr. John Duffy at drjohnduffy.com. Thank you so much for jumping on with us.
Thanks, guys. Good to talk to you.
All right,
Thanks,
you too.
Dr.
Have a great
Duffy.
week.